I'm happy to support the resolution that American universities should no platform Richard Spencer. The only definition here is no platform means to deny a platform to someone. It means exactly what it says, that we should not allow Richard Spencer to speak on American universities' campuses. Okay, so let's step into the criteria. This is a way for you to make your decision. And in the resolution I'm proposing, this is the way that universities should decide who they let speak and who they do not speak. Because every year, for every dozen or so people that are let onto campus and given speech, plenty of others are given denial. And there has to be a way that we make that decision. So the criterion that I propose is the quality of ideas, meaning that whether it's a commencement speech or a graduation, whether it's an actual professor, whether it's even a grade paper, we should always be evaluating speakers in academia based on the quality of the content that they actually offer us. The link here, the reason to use is that this is the purpose of academia. Everything in academia is based on the quality of ideas. It's why we call it an education system. We rate papers based on the quality of the content they put forward. We rate professors based on the quality of the education of their ideas that they give us. Now, quality of ideas doesn't mean you can't have challenging ideas or that all the ideas need to be an echo chamber and all sound the same. By no means. It just means that whatever ideas there are, they must be intellectually challenging, they must be rigorous, and they must be competent. So whatever decision we're making, we must choose high quality ideas and not low quality ideas. Let's step down into my first contention. You can write down as Richard's ideas are toxic. There's going to be 3 subpoints here. The A point is emboldening extremism. Now, for all of us, so we're all aware who Richard Spencer is, just so that we're clear. Richard Spencer is kind of the man that spearheaded the movement of the alt-right. He supports, quote, peaceful ethnic cleansing. He takes a neutral position towards figures like Hitler. He takes a neutral position towards issues like Nazism and the KKK. And I'm being generous by neutral. He's just chosen not to comment. But I mean, honestly, guys, if you ask someone, hey, do you think that the guy responsible for killing 6 million Jews was a good guy? And you say, man, gee, I don't know. Perhaps you actually do support him. So I'm not really just advocating that we get Richard Spencer out because I don't like his ideas. I mean, that would apply to plenty of people. We can have disagreement all over the place. Here's the point. Richard Spencer's ideas aren't actually good for people. They don't actually move America forward. They don't actually embolden our education by any means whatsoever. The degree to which Richard Spencer is in the light, that he's part of the conversation, doesn't help anyone. His ideas aren't good. His ideas aren't helpful. And so we shouldn't be giving them the attention that they don't deserve. The B subpoint is external danger. Now, the Anti-Defamation League reported that white supremacist messaging on college campuses has increased 258% between fall 2016 and 2017. So to pretend that racism in the alt-right movement is this just ideological difference is not true. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there's been 43 alt-right killings over the past 3 years. Now, Richard Spencer's ideas, while he doesn't explicitly say be violent, they've emboldened plenty of other people to be violent. He spread propaganda like statements like black students are abusing white women on Auburn's campus. His ideas don't deserve any attention.
How do we distinguish what a quality idea one is from a non-quality one?
That's a great question. Lots of things in life that we can't identify down with a bright line. For example, I can't tell you the exact minute it goes from day to night, but I can obviously tell you that right now it's nighttime. So yeah, I think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis. If you really want to disagree with me and say that Richard Spencer's ideas are quality, I welcome you to make that argument.
So just to be clear, I'm not a white supremacist. I subscribe to the system. But the point here is that, according to John Stuart Mill, but the particular evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is robbing the human race, those who dissent from the opinion, still more than those who hold it. If the opinion is right, they are deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. If wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception and livelier impression of truth produced by its collusion with its error. Because I agree with John Stuart Mill, I'm proud to oppose today's motion. So let's first take a look at my main 3 points, which are going to be looking at first, how free expression is integral to the purpose of universities. Second, looking at the core importance of free speech. And thirdly, looking at the problem with no platforming Richard Spencer. So first of all, we have to look at and understand that the purpose of a university is to pursue truth in discovering ideas. I would say that this is paramount over just the quality of ideas, because the point of having these ideas is to pursue some sort of truth. Universities are unique places because they bring together highly educated students from very diverse backgrounds, in the sense that the university's purpose is not to indoctrinate these students, it gives value to free thought and free speech. And the way that people find out what is true, what is right, is through giving multiple opinions, by hearing different diverse opinions and fighting it out through discussion. The second contention then is the importance of free speech. There's 3 warrants for this. The first is that it's essential to freedom to thought and what is most meaningful. Especially for minorities who hold minority opinions against dominant opinions, it's necessary to be able to defend what you believe. Secondly, it's key to democracy. It serves as a bulwark against tyranny so that you're able to have this clash of truth and error. You're not always going to be right the entire time, but this clash is necessary in democracy. And thirdly, I'm going to argue that this kind of censorship is an authoritarian measure. There are certain instances such as fighting words and incitement that I would agree that people should not be able to speak. However, I'd say that this is a separate case. It was free speech movements which drove like the suffrage movement, the Vietnam War protests, the push for civil rights movements. And I'm not saying that Spencer is in the same category, but what I'm saying is that by excluding Richard Spencer, you're also cutting down a line and saying that other speakers are not welcome as well. And we have to look at the externalities of what those are. I'll be getting that in future speeches. My main argument is that free speech is the best answer to hateful and incorrect rhetoric. You should give Spencer time to speak, perhaps put him in dialogue with another individual. You can follow up with an hour-long session of Q&A as it has been happening before. So Joe is probably going to say that we can restrict the bad speech and keep the good ones. But I have a couple responses to this. The first is that free speech is indivisible. Silencing one silences others. If you had looked to the Michigan speech codes, when they instituted speech codes, they were used against the people that they were trying to protect. Secondly, every code that was instituted and challenged was struck down because it was too hard to define the criteria for and against. And I'll get to the.
Should we ever deny a speaker from speaking on campus? Should we ever deny him the opportunity to give a commencement speech or something?
I would say that there's a difference between professional settings as well as a student inviting a speaker to give a speech.
So should we ever deny someone that students have invited?
If the person incites violence, uses fighting words, then yeah.
Well, so you're saying that you should ever not allow someone to speak is if they're violent. That's the only scenario.
Well, there are different kinds of speeches. For example, if a student group invites someone to give a speech, that's a lot different than, for instance, you giving a commencement speech, like a convocation or something like that.
So why is it different? Why should we destroy free speech when it comes to commencement, but not when students invite?
Okay, so for instance, when you're talking about professional settings, there are certain restrictions inside the classroom in regards to free speech. You can't just invite anyone into your classroom to talk about something. There are certain restrictions of what you can say in the classroom or what kind of topics are discussed.
So we're circling around the issue. My opponent is basically advocating for free expression and absolutes as long as they're not promoting violence. I'm going to deal with this argument, but first let's get down to his argument where he says free expression. Okay, I'm going to have three main responses to the issue of free speech. My first response is this is not a free speech issue. A free speech issue is when the government steps in and says you cannot say that thing. It is illegal to talk like that. We are not advocating in the resolution that the government prevent Richard Spencer from ever speaking. We are just saying that he should not be given the privilege to have the platform of a college event to speak his ideas. So the second thing under this I want you to remember is the entitlement issue. There's a very key difference between freely expressing ideas and being entitled to a college platform. For example, if I, let's say that I knew a bunch of my friends at a college campus and I said, I want to give a speech about why I hate Mexican people. And then the school said, we don't think that those ideas are actually furthering the values that we hold at this university. We don't think that they're helping the university at large, so we're not going to allow you. I couldn't claim, well, there's been a free speech issue. I wasn't allowed to be given a platform at this university. That's not what free speech is. The second response you can write down is external impacts. So my opponent can talk about the abstract, John Stuart Mill theoretical loss that we have to free speech, which we will find out in a second isn't even a loss. But I want you to remember the actual external impacts. For an application turned over to the University of Florida back in October of 2017, the public university spent an estimated $600,000 on security for the event. More than 500 law enforcement officers were deployed, a state of emergency was declared, and many students avoided classes and campus entirely on Thursday. Professors went on record as saying that this completely derailed the academic schedule, it made studying difficult, and it destroyed the academic purpose that they have at that university for the week. Why should we give someone just in the name of, well, we technically legally they have an idea, so we must put them on campus and give them a megaphone to talk about it? Why does that abstract opinion matter more than the actual practical benefits we experience at university? The third and the most central response you can write down is race to the bottom. Now here's what's critical. Josh has made a position in the last speech saying that unless someone's violent, they should be given the platform, which is I think a terrible way to understand how academia should choose who they actually hire. My response is very simple. Then we shouldn't be looking for good ideas at all. Let's find ideas that are even worse than Richard Spencer. Let's say find someone who says that the entire existence as we know it is a fevery dream, and that we have to have an even number of people on every geographical continent, or the alien that owns this universe will wake up and then zap everyone dead if we don't have that even number. So we got to commit mass genocide in Asia tomorrow morning if we want to make sure this checks out. According to my opponent's ideas, if we're just going to allow free expression, we should be pushing for that idea, because doesn't that further the marketplace of ideas and challenge us? Of course not. Come back to the criterion of quality of ideas. It's what academia is based on. Don't allow my opponent to just say, well, technically this mechanical rule means that we should let someone talk when it doesn't provide any practical good.
Okay, so let's move to his first two responses, that talking about how it's not a free speech issue and that it's an entitlement issue, or something about entitlement. My response, my advocacy is not that it's like a legal definition of free speech. I'm just saying that free speech ought to be given to Richard Spencer and that he ought to have the platform to speak. My argument isn't necessarily one based in law, it's one based in like ethics and philosophy. His third argument against this was talking about the external impact. I would say that this is not enough to say that someone shouldn't be able to speak. For example, when Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to give speeches, when Shapiro was trying to give speeches, I think you would say that those people should be able to be given platforms to speak. Just because there's chaos doesn't mean, or because people want to protest that person doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to speak. I would say it's more the fault of the students who are rioting instead of him itself. Fourthly, he talked about the race to the bottom, and he said, why don't we just go and find some other person? I would say that although Richard Spencer's ideas, I think, are wrong, he does raise some interesting questions that do drive forth certain parts of dialogue and discourse that I think are important. And so let's get to that in contention 3, the problem with no platforming Spencer. First, we have to understand a comparative analysis. There's two main problems that I'm going to identify. First is how you're making Spencer a martyr. So in the majority of cases, in like the public universities where 73% of students attend, Spencer will win money damages and be allowed to speak because he sues the university. Therefore, you're only going to be emboldening him on your side anyway, because you're enabling him a platform to speak and giving him money. But secondly, you lose unique engagement that is possible on my side of the house because Spencer will speak elsewhere where you cannot directly engage him, as opposed to when a university does allow him to speak, maybe in dialogue with someone, and there's a question and answer period. You're able to actually engage with his ideas, to talk and go through these kinds of dialogues and discussions that is necessary. And although I would say that Richard Spencer's prescriptions are wrong, he does bring up unique issues that do spark dialogue. For instance, the role of culture in regards to people who are of Caucasian descent, and the role of race in building identity. These things, again, these things will spark dialogue that will allow discussion for further pursuing of the truth to disseminate more quality ideas. This doesn't mean that his ideas are like paramount and he's like Harvard worthy or anything. It's just to say that there is meaning in discussing diverse opinions and having good things come out because of that.
I think that Richard Spencer has some good points.
I think he has some things that are some things he's brought up are interesting. I would disagree with most of his prescriptions, though.
Do you think that epistemology is interesting?
What do you mean?
Like the study of thought, like we were talking about before. Do you think that that area of philosophy is interesting?
Sure.
So should we invite the alien conspiracy theorists to speak on campus?
I mean, I don't know why anyone would actually invite that person.
Okay, I think that answers the question. So the first thing we should mention on the very beginning, he says, well, I'm clarifying, I'm not making a legal argument. Okay, great. Then you need to be making some argument about why it's a good thing to do. And at the very best, all you have is saying, well, guys, if we don't invite Richard Spencer, democracy will, extinguish itself. We'll never have free speech and we'll lose all of our rights. We'll also lose grasp of what the truth is. I mean, he's giving you this false choice and saying, well, we have to focus on this indivisible right. We're going to lose all the other stuff we were founded on. This is baseless rhetoric. It's not real. You don't actually lose democracy when you say, hey, a Hitler sympathizer who advocates for peaceful ethnic cleansing, maybe we shouldn't give him a spot on campus and cause a massive controversy and spend $500,000 trying to protect him. Maybe that's not a good idea. That's not the same as saying get rid of democracy. Don't allow him to make these slippery slope fallacies and sell you on the idea that the only way you can protect it is by allowing his ideas to have a megaphone. Okay, so this next thing he says is, Well, he still should be given it. The two things to remember are these are false choices and false comparisons. He's saying, well, we gave it to Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro, yes, Ben Shapiro, a prominent conservative who speaks calmly, listens to other people's questions, doesn't call people names, doesn't spread propaganda like that black students at Auburn University were, quote, sexually abusing white students, a baseless claim that's only intended to spark controversy and spread lies. No other figure that my opponent is referencing, I mean, the gall of referencing MLK and saying, well, MLK had free speech. So someone who literally stands up and says that MLK is a con artist and has destroyed white America should also, yeah, that's on the equivalent level of right. I think that's absolutely silly. The last thing he says is on the no platform issue. He says, well, this would make him a martyr. My response is silence erases martyrs. The easiest way to get Richard Spencer going is to continue to give them the megaphone that my opponent keeps giving them. I want you to reference back to the Anti-Defamation League set about how anti-black and alt-right movements have grown by 256% in the past year. This isn't because they were silent. This isn't because they weren't given time at college campuses. It's because they were given the absolute spotlight. Remember back to the rhetoric that we mentioned in the 1AC in the first speech where we say, look, the spotlight is the problem here. The less attention these people get, the less people will remember them. We know that ostracization works. We don't remember the people that we can't. So stop giving these people the light when it's only providing a way to embolden people that are different. My last response is my external impacts outweigh everything. My opponent's making theoretical arguments about why we have to preserve truth. He's made no links to how erasing Richard Spencer from our memory will somehow do that. But the external impacts about costing $500,000, raising a state of emergency, the actual practical violence that's been inspired by Richard Spencer, 43 alt-right killings within the past 3 years, at least 20 of those were committed just within the past year. Are we honestly going to pretend that it's a good idea just in the name of some technical philosophical idea to allow someone to speak whose ideas are trash and dangerous?
Would you allow a Marxist to speak at a college campus?
Depends if the Marxist has completely toxic ideas or not. I think some tenets of Marxism are intellectually stimulating and challenging. I don't think that Richard Spencer's idea of peaceful ethnic cleansing, of creating a white ethno-state, of banning all immigration from other people, of racially stereotyping Jews and virtually every other racial minority on the planet. I don't find that intellectually stimulating, and I would honestly ask you to defend that it is. If you're going to stand up and say, well, we need to have free speech and competition of ideas, then defend that his ideas are actually competitive.
So there's people in my state who are calling for a Hawaiian sovereignty movement in which there's a nation of Hawaii with people only of Hawaiian descent. Do you think that person should be able to speak at a college campus?
I didn't quite hear you.
There's people in the Hawaiian sovereignty movement who are calling for a sovereign Hawaiian state where the only people there are of native Hawaiian descent, seceding from the U.S. Do you think that person should be able to speak?
I know what you mean by Hawaiian state.
Like a Hawaiian nation.
I mean, yeah, I don't think that idea is intellectually stimulating. I don't think it deserves a place. I don't think it deserves the privilege of a platform like this either, no.
Okay, so my main argument here is that this is a principled argument that has a practical underpinnings. When you are to exclude a certain belief or exclude certain ideas from coming to the polity, that you're actually having negative impacts on other forms of speech that are going to occur. So let's first look at his first intention about how Richard's ideas are toxic. He first says that this emboldens extremism. I'm going to point out that yes, people do have extreme ideas, and yes, it is speech which is the best counter that I'm going to argue for this. His second main point is that there's an external increase. I would like to point out statistics from The Economist that say that racism has been decreasing in the past 10 years in the United States up to the 2017. Tracking that long, even with the outcomes that he's saying, whereas in Europe, the Anti-Defamation League notes that these kinds of attitudes are increasing in Europe when they have these kinds of hate speech codes. So I wouldn't say that necessarily the presence of banning certain speakers or allowing certain speakers has led to any of these activities. But next, let's move on to his argument, which states that the external impact outweighs everything. Again, he contradicts himself when he says that because the external impact for other speakers like Shapiro did occur, that person should be able to speak. My argument here isn't that Spencer is the same as Shapiro or MLK. What I'm saying is that the external impact of something, a speech trying to be held is not a reason to negate that person from having a platform. There are other reasons as to why that is the case. You can have more secure venues. You can ask students not to riot in that manner, or like prevent the person from speaking. There are certain things that you can do in order to give this. This is why I'm advocating that he should be able to have some sort of a speaking platform. It's not to say that the university is promoting his ideas. It's giving a chance for students to hear different dialogue and opinions. So let's move back to my first intention, which says that the uniqueness of a university is to pursue truth, and that should be held at the foremost. And then when students are given diverse opinions, they're able to exchange them to see which one is correct. In my questioning just recently, I was bringing up the Hawaiian sovereignty movement and whether or not that should be something that is able to be brought about. If you're saying that someone from the Hawaiian sovereignty movement saying protesting the causes and the oppression that has occurred because of America to the Hawaiian people or things like that, that they shouldn't be granted a platform, you're excluding many different voices from being able to occur. Those may be bad voices, you may disagree with them, but they are voices that should be spread because there are unique ideas and opinions that won't be spread and disseminated if that's not the case.
Society should be given a chance to give the commencement speech at Harvard.
Do I think that who?
The Flat Earth Society.
I think that the Harvard who they want as it's a more professional speech. Just because we say that the flat earth speaker shouldn't be able to give the commencement speech, if someone wants to invite him for another speech, I would say let him speak.
You don't think they should give the commencement speech or not? What's your position?
I would say in a professional setting they can say no to that person, but in another setting they should allow him to speak.
So why is speaking professionally in front of dozens of students and graduates, why is that not a professional setting?
There's a delineation there. I mean, the purpose of someone coming to speak to spread ideas is very different than like a commencement speech, which is tending to be like professional people like Obama or other famous alumni.
Okay, so the first thing is my opponent's making this false distinction that somehow we should care about the quality is, but only at the end of school, that we shouldn't really give a rip who we let speak at the very beginning. I think that this is silly. The first thing is students are not asking Richard Spencer to come. Opponents keep saying, well, this is just some student request you're denying. He's never quoted one statistic saying that students are asking. Tons of students are the people protesting and saying that they shouldn't invite Richard Spencer. So why on earth is my opponent saying that it's the free expression of students that we're pulling down? No, we're simply denying someone who wants to be able to come to a campus and saying you can't do that. The student request here has nothing to do with it. I want to come back to two central things. The first is the criterion. My opponent is offering no counterweighing mechanism. He's fundamentally conceded the idea that the quality of ideas is the best way to measure. Don't wait until graduation to start caring about the quality of ideas. What kind of academic system are we giving that says, yeah, we should be concerned about the quality of ideas, but only at the very end where people are already done with their entire education. Give a platform to the good ideas, not the bad ones. Don't give it to alien, thievery, existence, conspiracy theories. That's not helpful. I want to ask my opponent one very pointed question. Yale University recently banned a fraternity from marching around campus saying no means yes, yes means anal. Do you think that that was a good decision or not?
Where was the band marching or whatever? Where were they marching? Like, were they obstructing campus?
No, they were marching around their own. They were marching around their own buildings on campus. They weren't blocking traffic.
I mean, I would say that if they weren't causing any other distress to like the educational environment or things like that, and it was like a private space, like, yeah, they should be able to do that.
So my opponent, I think could make an argument that free speech should be allowed for citizens, in general places, and that's what I think. I don't think the solution is to put duct tape over Richard Spencer's mouth everywhere. The question is, what should we do when we get to universities? My opponent's standard of, quote unquote free speech doesn't precisely limit itself to academia. We don't just say in academia, we'll let anyone who has a voice box and the ability to communicate in a given language, the ability to have a platform. We don't allow professors to give speeches unless they have some sort of credential. We don't invite commencement speakers unless they have good quality of ideas. Why would we throw out all of the basic standards of reasonability and sense when it comes to inviting other platforms? My opponent's standard currently would allow literally anyone, meaning literally like anyone who supposes some not even just a dangerous idea, not even an idea that's full of propaganda and lies, but just an idea that's ridiculous and moronic and dumb, that shouldn't be given that platform to begin with. So the argument for pro is very simple. Don't give a platform to bad ideas. Start giving the platform to the better ideas. If we want to actually further the truth and education, we shouldn't give it to moronic postulations that are completely false, dangerous, and cause external harms to the rest of everyone at campus.
Okay, so let's break down the main voting issues in the debate. Let's first look at how free expression and free speech is important, regardless of the kind of ideas that are going to be presented. Now, again, to his criteria of quality of ideas, I didn't necessarily say that this was a counter mechanism, but what my counter criteria here is the pursuit of truth, as I mentioned, as that being the purpose of the university and the reason why free expression, free dialogue are necessary. The university is not here in order to indoctrinate you with certain ideas. It's to present you with multiple competing interpretations, and you are able to use speech and dialogue in order to prove that certain ones are more true or that certain ones are better, and engage with false doctrine in order to find out what is true. But secondly, we have to see the impacts of the freedom of speech. Now, specifically with the case of Richard Spencer, you have to note that there's two main advantages to allowing him to speak at your campus. First is that is that if you don't, you make him a martyr, because he'll soon be able to speak when you're talking about public universities, and he'll gain money in that regard, and you're only giving him fuel in that regard. And secondly, you lose the engagement that is possible on my side of the house, because when he does come to my university, if he comes to my university, I'm able to engage with him in dialogue. I'm able to see what his opinions are and to realize that they are bad, and I want to engage him in certain manner. And this stimulates like people and discussion and dialogue. He raised the idea about culture and race and what identity has to do with that. And I'm not saying that his ideas are right, but the kind of discourse and dialogue I think are unique and important ideas to be able to raise. Let's realize that just because you know platform Richard Spencer, that has other externality and other impacts and other speakers that would be invited. I'm going to say that if you say that someone who has low quality ideas will not be invited, that the ideas that are true, that we say are true, were once considered full of error, that they were nothing. And this is not to say that Richard Spencer's ideas are right. It is to say that ideas that we find to be true don't always seem that way, that sometimes they seem ludicrous. And to exclude certain arguments because they don't seem worthy, they don't have good quality of ideas, shuts down progress in society. It's something, when you hear the oppression stories, for example, of someone in the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, not saying that ought to occur, but hearing that voice and being able to engage in dialogue concerning the role of a state and the role of government and oppression by another group and annexing, you're able to experience that kind of thing. Again, looking to the problems with no platforming Richard Spencer, I'm going to say that there are better benefits in regards to freedom of speech. I'm going to wrap up the case in my next speech.
Okay, so quick question for you. You said that we should pursue the truth. So what if should we invite a speaker that's knowingly spreading?
I would say yes, so that you're able to engage with that opinion and distinguish the truth from falsehood.
Okay, so how do we how does inviting propaganda encourage the truth to be spread?
You're able to understand what his links are, what his claims are, and be able to think about the issue in a deeper context.
All right, my first argument is going to be about the real world that we live in. So my opponent keeps saying, oh, yeah, we should pursue the truth, but let's totally invite speakers that are knowingly spreading lies. Harken back to Richard Spencer saying that black students were sexually abusing white women on campus. Of course that's going to rile up the alt-right in the room. Of course that's going to embolden people towards violence. That's why the Southern Poverty Law Center has noted that there's been 43 alt-right killings between 2014 and 17. That now, up until this point, the actual violence committed by right-wing extremism has now almost doubled that of typical Islamic extremism that we think of. The real world impacts here are real. So don't let my opponent say this is some theoretical idea that we're allowing when it's actually emboldening people to do bad things. There's been violence, multiple counts of violence at Richard Spencer's speeches. My second argument is complete false choices. My opponent literally says, we've been wrong before, so we better let Richard speak because, hey, you never know, a white ethno-state might actually be the solution. Hold him to these words, these ridiculous comparisons, and saying, well, democracy will die if we don't allow him in, or, well, he's just like MLK, we need to give him free speech, is ridiculous. Richard Spencer's ideas are terrible and they don't deserve attention. My third and final argument is attention must be merited. Come back to the criterion of the quality of ideas. He's never contested this. Don't let him contest it now. We evaluate academia on quality, not on existence.
Okay, so let's first look at how I mentioned that free speech is indivisible. in that when you exclude a certain person from speaking, you're also excluding other people from speaking. So just by excluding Richard Spencer because of his qualities of ideas, meaning you're going to be excluding many other ideas that would be beneficial in other regards, as I brought up in my last speech. But secondly, we have to see at how free speech and truth is the best disinfectant for noxious ideas. I'm going to say that the ability for someone to persuade through discourse, to show and experience different belief systems, and to win them out, have one win out through the marketplace of ideas and the pursuing of truth is the best way in which this occurs. But thirdly, you have to recognize that you don't want to make Richard Spencer a martyr, that you can actually engage him if you allow him to speak at your campus and be able to engage with his ideas so that you can put forth your truth.